Boom, we're live. Okay, now Instagram time.
Come on, IG. There it is. I got it. Did you get it?
Yeah.
Really, this is like trial by fire, y'all.
Oh, I can see it. Oh, let's go. I think it's working.
Yeah, I can hear you on her.
You hear the loop?
We're live.
Yay.
Oh, perfect. Okay, cool. I'm getting feedback from your thing, I think.
I X'd out. I don't know if that's going to ruin us going live on our end or not, but it shouldn't. I don't know because the StreamYard is live. We'll see. We'll find out afterwards.
You're muted.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
We had it for like 5 seconds and then she just X'd out of it.
Oh, maybe it's actually ours. I think.
That's what it was. It was like in the background of ours as well.
So I don't know if you X out of the IG tab, if that ruins it or not.
All right, I'll just exit it, and if it's no.
If it doesn't, we'll find out.
What can we do? Is there another?
I'm gonna see. It says you're live on IG. I'm looking.
But you haven't X'd out.
Everybody's like, these people know what they're doing.
You guys, this is first time. This is awesome.
Yeah.
I'm gonna X out of it. Let's see if it goes away.
We've got 7 viewers on IG. So
Well, IG's going down. I don't know if they're still going, but if they're still going, then cool. I don't know how to stop it.
We'll find out.
gosh, I feel like we need to. You guys just got so cozy. I'm like, hold on.
That's because his shoulders take up the whole
I know. I got
screen.
like even when we're on airplanes and I'm like next to and I can't sit like aisle seat, right? Because then you get the extra little kick of the leg room. But then they hit me with the cart when they like
All the
push
time.
me.
Me too.
So, super frustrating.
When he's sleeping, he'll just jolt.
Gotta make Britt look taller, man. Y'all are more even height.
I'm good.
Anyways, what's up, everybody? Whoever's here, welcome to the what do you call it? The
launch episode.
The launch episode of our entrepreneur family. I'll just do a little real talk. Number one, like we've been talking about this for a while. Like it's funny how when you have ideas, divine inspiration, and you misinterpret it sometimes, like you don't really like, you kind of either jump the gun or you wait too late. Like it's just that discerning process is funny. And I remember like, I don't know, probably when was that Dash Digital season? Like 3 years ago?
A couple years ago, yeah.
It was at least 3 years ago. I was doing these like media days, growing all this content. And I was like, oh, we should do this power couples thing. And we recorded like this, I don't know, like promo series for launching this power couples thing.
Yeah.
And I thought that's what this was going to be. But, years later, after your life unfolds and you get into things, it was like, no, our entrepreneur family, right? Like we feel like we have a family of entrepreneurs in their own right. If not, if that won't be necessarily their career path, it's definitely the mindset that they'll have.
That's good.
And so it's just like, man, there's so many different dynamics that families can have as entrepreneurs, whether it's blended families, whether it's people who inherited family businesses, whether it's people who all their kids are entrepreneurs. There's so many different dynamics and so many different nuances and so much that goes into it. I just thought it would be so good to get into an in-depth discussion in a series that can really empower individuals and families to be better, to make more impact, make more income, and all those things. Okay. So thank y'all for joining live.
Hey, for such a time as this, that's all I keep hearing is like we come up with ideas and then we don't have the time to necessarily do it, or we feel like it's out of alignment in that season. And like God uses that time and he births what he ultimately wants. And so this is such a great conversation. We could talk about each of our kids individually, just in what, traits they have at this stage in their life. So it's fun to be able to look at it from a full picture, hopefully inspire others.
Totally. And I definitely want to get into that for sure. Let's just, while you're there, like walk us through. Number one, can we just pause and celebrate not just the launch of this episode, but the fact that we have Gary on a live stream? Like that is a win for the day. Gary just made my week, bro.
Hallway ministry, man. That's where I feel called to be. That's where I like Brittany and I were in like the kitchen or something like that. We were in like the foyer, the cafe for like an hour, but hallway ministry, you know what I mean? But you know what? This is a good platform. I'm excited to be on.
Man, we're so excited, bro. Looking like a model. Look like an underwear model over there.
He is actually only wearing underwear. You just can't see that he has
Hilarious. Let us into your journey. Talk to us about like your individual journeys, how y'all came together. I kind of forget like who was in entrepreneurial first, but just like let us know a little bit about that path and how y'all got to where y'all are today.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm older than her. So I got started first. Well, actually, that's not entirely true, because when you were in college, that was your business.
Yeah.
I mean, she was there for her business degree, and it was very entrepreneurial. So maybe it was in alignment. But I was like thrown to the wolves to the real world first. So started working first, worked for a company, a corporate company for a couple of years. And then after that, kind of just jumped into it, feet first, head first, got burned by the coals. And along the way, try and just give her as much insight and wisdom, because I fail so much that when I'm failing, I'm like, let's fail forward. Let's just try and let me take all the hits, and let me just try and give you wisdom so you don't have to skin your knees like I did. But
man, I'm so hard-headed. So most of the time I don't receive said wisdom in the way in which I should, right? Because I'm just going to do it different. I'm going to blaze my own trail. And it's been really, I think, just since I stepped into what is Fit and Faith and what is Founder Collective in this last season of understanding surrender, understanding what it means to truly submit to your husband and to yield to what it is that he's trying to teach me, rather than in my 20s. I was so just, nope, I got this, boo. You stand over there and watch your wife go, right? Like, she's got this. I was an entrepreneur right out of college, and partially thanks to Gary. We met in college. Well, I was in college and he was in the real world. I remember he walked in to my apartment, and like, no one wore polo shirts and no one carried Medela Light. Okay. Everyone was Natty Light and old rusty tees. And I'm like, whoa, who's this guy? Right. And I remember that very night we sat in my kitchen for 2.5 hours, just like locked eyes, talking. I think we called my dad during that conversation. I knew already that he was somebody who was different and someone I wanted to spend my life with very, very fast. But I had to take my own trail for a while, and he wanted to be best friends first. And I didn't know what that meant in a relationship. And so that was really confusing for me. Many people told me he was gay, because why would he not want to pursue me? And I'm like trying to figure out like, what is happening here? And ultimately it led to us being together for almost 4.5 years before we got married. And he was in business and I was in business, and we really haven't known a life outside of entrepreneurship, but entrepreneurship in itself almost led us to a divorce, led me to suicidal ideation. So it's a very big conversation.
Say more.
Yeah, what is that?
Let's drop the bomb.
How did entrepreneurship almost lead to your divorce? What does that look like?
Do you want to share that?
I think we were just doing it separate, we just weren't locked arm in arm. She had her path, her journey. I had my path, my journey. And I think what happens is you feel like you're just flying by each other through the night, I mean, at this point we had just had babies. So I think our kids were like 1 and 2. And she was just charging hard towards career, you know what I mean? And so was I, you know what I mean? I was building still business. And it was a lot of just survival. And so I think that's where we just, again, it's like when two ships are going, if you just separate by 1 degree in a year, they're really far apart, right? It doesn't feel like, it wasn't necessarily we did a 180 and we're going away from each other. It was just that degree of separation. And
that's so good. Yeah.
I think I was also terrible at resting. And so even in the times where we would be with our family or with our kids, or I had just had a baby, I was still like full speed ahead, creating this idea that had been presented to me and presented to all of us, honestly, if you're an American, this idea of an American dream. And so it's like the white picket fence, the 2 nice cars, both entrepreneurs, boy first, girl second, the youngest family in the neighborhood. We checked all those boxes on top of the fact of people calling us Barbie and Ken. So we had these exterior. I mean, this is
good looking.
right? I need longer, blonder hair, but pretty much. And so it was this societal expectation and yet also the societal norm. And so if someone's like, praise, 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 you're like, I'm doing a good thing. This is a good thing. And we found much later that a good thing is not a God thing. And that was when we decided to lay it all down, is we had this option of, are we going to continue to go separate? So much so that I had been unfaithful. I was literally, my mind was never where my body was. And so it wasn't just resting, it was also practicing presence. And I didn't know that until we had a supernatural encounter with Jesus in our living room, in a depth of despair of, are we going to do this thing together? Are we going to walk this thing out together? And are you willing to risk it all in order to find out what it means to be married, and find out what it means to love someone, and find out what it means to later really be an entrepreneur, and to do it for the Lord instead of doing it for your flesh?
Yeah.
That's so good.
I have a question, but
I want to hear it. I would love to have y'all paint that picture of like just flying by each other at the night in that season, because I think so many people find themselves in that, and we certainly were in it. Even, it's funny, even though like a good part of like our life together, we were working in church ministry together. And so it was like we would see each other at work all the time, but it was just like work, and it was just like there was not like a lot of interaction and connection. It was just like, if anything, it probably was just building up wrath for an argument later in the day. And then we get home and you got all this stuff. So I would love to just hear like, so like, what was Gary doing and what were you doing? And then when you came home, what was that like? And just like, what was that routine that y'all were stuck in? And then I'll let you know, like, ultimately I'm looking for like, what would you have said to yourself in that routine to maybe wake yourself up?
So I think that with every entrepreneur, there's a competitive spirit, right? To win, because you feel like you have to win every day in order. For me, it was survival, right? So like I didn't start a company and it was a $10 million company and we were making $5 million a year. I mean, it wasn't like that at all. It was, we started an HVAC company with $20 in the bank, you know? And so every day was like, gosh, I mean, we have got to go out and hunt and gather in order to make it work. And in that, I would leave the house at 5 o'clock in the morning. And in the very early stages, even before kids, I would have to leave right in the middle of dinner, you know, because it was like any chance that there was an opportunity, I was like, I need to close. I need to close because we have to survive, you know? And at that moment, there's been moments where we've lived on like one income, you know, more or less. And so in that, there was like heavy responsibility and provider, protector, and, you know, all the things. So I think that with that competitive spirit is a big part of just dropping everything and trying to go win, right? When you know that, you know, the Lord is our provider, right? Jireh, that's the provider that we need. That's where we need to lean. Versus like, oh, I've got to leave right now. I've got to do this. Otherwise, everything's going to fail, because that's in your flesh. Right. So.
Well, and I think there's that conversation of what is success. And and I claim this in the book that I wrote about this story, Always Becoming, is we quit the American dream, right? And so people are like, well, what does that mean? And like, you're so privileged to be in America. Why would you say such a thing? And it's not anti-America. That's not it at all. It's anti-success. It's anti-materialism. It's anti-facade. It's anti- cultural like practices and cultural norms and tradition. It's really about living a life of sustenance, which is ultimately fruit bearing. And if you are listening to this and you're like, what is she talking about? It's like, this is from Galatians 5:22. Biblically, it's the fruit that really people want. It's what we truly want to win in our hearts of hearts, but we don't understand that because it's never presented to us. Don't you want to win joy? Don't you want to win peace? Don't you want to win goodness and kindness and gentleness and love? I mean, those are the things that we were passing through and saying, these are the things right before you. Your fruit tree is right here. Will you abide? Will you abide together as one so that you can bear such fruit for your children? Let's just talk about our home. It's not even about other people. We didn't even have fruit to give our kids at that point. We gave them our leftovers of our exhaustion of trying to do this thing for who?
Right.
So that they could be satisfied by our success, so that they could, again, just applaud this facade. It was detrimental, and it was being done without knowledge. And I think this is where people can get confused, is you don't even understand, just like the mask, like the green mask from Jim Carrey, you don't even understand that you've been taken over by this mask, and that the enemy is actually the one winning in said scenario. And so our daily rhythms, he would leave at 5. I would have to nurse the babies. And then I ran a brick and mortar store at the time. So I had to be there, which is a whole nother thing. Even though I was an entrepreneur, I still felt like ball and chain with having to be in a facility. And then on top of that, I was approached by the Australian #1 nursing bra line that they wanted to bring it to the American, United Kingdom, and Canadian markets. And so I was redesigning a nursing bra, and I was launching that to these 3 markets. And so I was the CEO of that company, the CEO of this company, these 2 babies, trying to be a wife, and none of it was working. And so it was, dollar sign to dollar sign, because we were rubbing nickels together at that point. And yet there was this presented contract of 9 figures that like kept me going. And why is money the thing that always gets us into this place of friction? And like there's top 4, probably know this better than I, reasons that people get divorced, and finances is 100% one of them. You remember the other ones offhand?
I don't. No,
I know we always talk about finances. But I think ultimately it comes down to this simple dangling fruit of divorce. People think that they can just like quickly, oh, it's fine, I'll just jump to the next. And that grass is greener is such a lie. It's such a lie. And you guys know that really well yourselves.
I actually remember the 4 now.
Oh, tell me.
Yeah. So it's finances. It's how you parenting.
Yeah.
And then if you're not in spiritual alignment.
Yep.
So
those are the 3.
Wow, I can see that.
Wow. You said something so interesting, because, we are in this, like, what seems like this rat race, and you feel like you're doing it for such a just reason. Like, I'm going to give my kids this life. I'm going to, we're going to generational curses and whatever we came out of, we're going to give them a better life and all this stuff, not realizing, like you said, like practicing presence today is giving them all of those things right now, today. Like it's absolutely available. Let alone the better path to actually create the life and business that is going to continue to feed us and feed them, because you're building and sowing seeds from a place of trusting God and being in alignment with the way that he's calling you to build it. And so keeping our head down and blinders on and like, I'm going to achieve this thing for them. And it's like, but what are you sacrificing right now? And what are you building for them from that place? Like that's nobody wants to pass that on.
Well, it just makes me think of like a trust fund baby, and like they end up blowing it. Right. And this is a blanket statement. So don't get me wrong if you're listening and you're a trust fund baby and you're like the most philanthropic missionary. I love you. Thank you for your but I mean, that's true. It's like you come into something and they're going to come into something without character. And that's ultimately the job that God has us on. The mission that he has us on is like, develop your character, become like me so that you can train up the child in the way that they should go. But if you're training them up to become like who you are in your flesh, or who America or who the world, we'll just say the world at large wants you to be, you're missing it. And it's sometimes in the missing it when it's too late that you actually have those scales removed to say, well, what's the problem? Right. And it's like, man, we have to take ownership that we are likely the problem. And how do we shift that now and not wait until a new season, or wait until you have more time, or wait until the finances make sense? Y'all, I quit both of those jobs simultaneously, both of those businesses. And for 3 years, I did what Mother Teresa tells us to do, truly says, if you want to be successful, go home and love your family.
Mm.
And that's what I did. And it was honestly one of the hardest seasons of my life because I had lost my identity, because my identity had become that I was an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And so what am I now when I go and I meet all my husband's friends and they're like, so what do you do? And you get that glassed over look of men who are like, oh, I'm a mom. Okay, who else is in the room? And you're immediately seen as a nobody when we're actually doing one of the most important jobs that we could ever do, that humanity has ever done.
Yeah, the hardest job too. I mean, it's so difficult. You know, it's I think it's easier to go to work for sure, obviously. And I think a big part of that competitive spirit with entrepreneurialism is that when you're in a season of comparison, right? With social media, it's easy to see comparisons. So that's sometimes why we find ourselves waking up is because we see our neighbor or our competitor, you know, rising up, right? And it's not always the case. It's just sometimes the facade of social media. But that competitive spirit sometimes gets us in front of being present with our kids, right? And I read a statistic recently. It was like, it's not how much time you spend with your kids, it's actually how joyful that you are. And it's a lot like a lecture, right? So it's you don't remember the lecture, you remember how you felt when someone spoke.
That's
to you,
so good,
right? So it's with the kids, it's less the hours of the day that you spend with them, and more how do they feel when you're present? Are you present? Right. Or are the wheels still turning? And we all know as an entrepreneur that it's a 24/7 mindset, right? You wake up at 2:00 in the morning, you're like, got it. I figured it out. Or you wake up at 2:00 in the morning, and you're like, I don't have the solution. Right. You wake up at 3:00 and you're like, I still don't have it. I don't know how we're going to do this tomorrow. I don't know how we're going to do this next week. Right. Whether the problem is a one-day problem or a decade problem, right? It's not that every problem is so achievable to find a solution to. So, but again, with social media, we get these clips of comparison where we're like, man, they figured it out. And if you know, one man is like another, we all put our pants on one leg at a time, our shoes on one shoe at a time. You know, what one man can do, so can another, but you're only seeing these highlight clips. So just to know that everybody is still struggling like with a lot of things, you know?
Yeah. And being in this like digital entrepreneur space, social media is so tricky because oftentimes, I mean, you know this, like your business like is promoted and marketed on social media. So there is a fine line. I think it's a rhythm and a dance to like be authentic and transparent. And also like, okay, I can't lay all my stuff out there because this is my marketing platform.
Yes, totally.
In the back of your mind, the enemy's like, if you get really real, who's going to come, you know, get coached by you or come to your event or
completely.
You know, that's been an interesting dance for us too.
Sure.
I have so many things I could say to that. And I'm like, ask another question. Well, I know I wildly agree with that. So much so that when we were at our last conference, we were having a conversation on like, what does that keynote look like? What is it that you want to share? What is God leading you to share? And something that the Lord has been calling me into more and more and more. Obviously, he's calling us into like truth and sharing the truth, but to rip away the Band-Aid, rip away the facade of what entrepreneurship can become and be seen as. And a lot of that has to do with numbers, right? And numbers based on social media, numbers based on finances, numbers based on how many community members you have, numbers on how many clients you've actually served. There's just a lot. And I want to talk to people about that because I think there's so many who just want to get to the millions and they want to have this massive impact. And I want to be Billy Graham and speak in front of the whole arena. And like, that's really cool. But do you know, just like Martin Luther King, how many speeches he did before the 600 speeches before the I Have a Dream speech? And no one wants to talk about those speeches. I want to read those speeches. I want to know what that was that he said, that he had to come into the maturity of that message. And so part of our maturity as a couple has been maturing in entrepreneurship separately and now seeing what God is doing and he's calling us back together. So this is such a cool like moment because it's going to be what you see more of in 2024 is how do we really do this together? And it's not just a date night conversation because that's another whole conversation is like, what is intimacy when you're an entrepreneur, because it's like, let's talk about our businesses, what's working, what's not working. And then of course you're naturally going to talk about your kids. And so it's like, when do you fall back in love? When do you keep the fire and the flame between you when you have these other babies? I don't care how many kids y'all have, way more than we do. But I don't know if I can keep track anymore.
We're done.
Right. But thinking, these are also babies that have to be nurtured consistently. And so it's important that the prioritization of our life and the way in which we show up is through intimacy first, and intimacy with the Lord individually, and then what that looks like when we're together.
So good.
What is intimacy in relationship as it relates to entrepreneurship? That's
Ooh, that's a beautiful question.
Like, how would you?
What is intimacy when it relates to entrepreneurship?
Yeah. Like, as entrepreneurs, what do you see as intimacy? I have an interesting response of my own, but I would love to know what your thoughts are.
And are you specifically meaning intimacy through marriage that then
Not giving you any more.
I got two. I guess I have
leave it at that.
Okay, you go.
You go first.
Okay. I think about it. What we always say associated to our marriage is lights on love. Like, I want to have lights on love. And yes, I am literally talking about the bedroom, turn the lights on, people. Because for a whole long time, I just was like, only in the dark, only with wine, only when I feel comfortable, only when there was all of these, like, kind of like when I sleep, I need earplugs, I need the sound machine, I need to be like with my cozy pillow. Like, there was all these things. And like, God's like, no, intimacy with me is instantaneously. Intimacy with me is a word. It's a linger. It's I'm always with you. And so lights on love is where we are in our relationship now. And then from an entrepreneurial perspective, I think you alluded to it, Brittany. It's like intimacy is vulnerability. Intimacy is authenticity. And these are like buzzwords. And so let's go layer deeper. What does that mean? Intimacy is sharing your now rather than sharing your win later. And that is so important to me. I want to walk life with people. I don't want to get to the mountaintop with people. I want to go, and he's a mountaineer himself. And so like, our favorite part is to walk the journey with people. And if we only see those mountaintops, those highlight moments, there's a false reality that we can't grasp hold of because we're like, you're so far away. I don't even know how to get there. And so to be intimate in your business is to really understand and walk the people who are wanting to follow behind you through the real road and not the fake supersonic, like get rich quick, or, become the massive speaker that you want to be immediately. Like, no, it's the 600 speeches before.
So good.
Did you have time to?
Yeah. So I'm thinking a lot when I think of intimacy in that space. And I just keep hearing like presence, be present. Right. And it's when I think about work and when I think about the kids and when I think about the day and when I think about, I'm planning. Right. And I'm thinking, well, the kids got to get dropped off at 9, and then I got to pick them up at 3, and then there's sports, and then there's dinner, and then there's tomorrow, and then there's Friday, and then there's Sunday, and then we're doing two services, and then we're, it's all the things. So like being present is like the most intimate thing that I can think of when it comes to relationship. Right.
So
and
that's so
I
good.
think that's where like that hallway ministry comes into place, where I'm just like, hey, there's a really good speaker on right now in the middle of the conference, but I'm just going to go in. Like, I'm here right now. Like, let's go deep. You know what I mean? And so I think that it's a little bit of my gift to be able to do that.
Yes.
And it's hard. I think it's hard in this time because there's such an overwhelm of information. Right. So there's your phone's ringing, you have text messages, social media is going, there's a speaker on at the conference. There's a good speaker in 3 minutes. The kids are in school. We got date night on Friday. It's like, there's so much information. But how do we essentially just pause that moment and be ultra present? Right? Create space and create safe space. And like in that safe space, I think that's where like intimacy on all levels, right? Between Tamra and I, or me and Darryll, or anything, right? It's just like, that's when you can create space.
I think a really like practical thing that Gary's really good at, he mentioned it, it's a part of his gifting, but what does that actually mean? Anthony Hart, one of our friends who's a pastor that you guys are friends with, he talks about Gary in this way a lot from the pulpit because it's a really tangible example. And it's eye contact and it's leveled playing field. So Brittany is much shorter than Gary. And if he's talking to you, he's literally straddling his legs and he's coming down so that he can look to you eye to eye. He does the exact same thing with our kids on auto. Like it's not a question. It's not a, oh shoot, I'm supposed to be down with it. It is just, it's an automatic response. If they need him, he's down here. And that is practicing presence in a way that no one else does. And so something that I am constantly coming back to is like, oh my gosh, what is my body doing in this moment? You know, when you're talking to someone and they're literally looking over your shoulder to see who else they're going to talk to next. Worst feeling. And you're kind of like, looking over your shoulder. Should I be looking where you're looking? Like, what's happening? And so it's distracting you and you're in your mind. We already have enough self-worth issue things that we're walking through on a consistent basis. Now that person is literally telling you you're not worthy of my eyesight. You're not worthy of the thing that's coming out of your mouth. And so it's so important to just be present. And those are tangible ways that we can do it with our littles and with people that we are the same or not the same height with, is like, get on a level playing field with people. That's why Jesus loved childlike spirit, childlike faith, is because he was just like, you know, everyone loves to play. Everyone loves to have a good laugh. And so I think it's us practicing that. And what does it look like with us in our individual gifting?
Yeah.
So good, man. Number one, I hope you, whether you're watching this live or you're watching the replay, like most people will, I hope that you are catching why. I said we brought y'all on for 3 reasons as like the launch episode. I said number 1, because y'all are dope. Number 2, because y'all are friends. And number 3, because there's like a deep well of wisdom. And y'all, like, we're definitely going to have you on multiple times. Like, it's just like there's so many things we can go into because of the journeys that you have had. And also your willingness to be vulnerable about those journeys. You know, like a lot of people have been through a lot of things, but they don't share a lot of what they've been through.
Yeah.
You know, and so like that's so beautiful. And so like I hope y'all are catching this. I would love to know what you're taking away. Let us know in the chat. And then if you're watching this replay, #replay, engage. The thing I love about social media is that even if you're not live and present like Mr. Master Gary is, we can still engage. We can still be in a conversation about the conversation that's happening right now. So just make sure that you're doing that. And of course, click the share button. If you're finding some value in this conversation, share this on your social network so that this information can get out there to other people. There's so many, man, I'd be curious of how many divorces happen because people couldn't figure out these nuances that we're covering right now.
Yeah. It's so
how many families are destroyed? And again, not every divorce ends in this horror story. Like I know people who have like great at, you know, raising blended families, but like how much more connected, how much more rich could the family unit be if people heard these conversations and knew that people have been through these experiences and had like pathways out.
I think really quickly, I'll jump in right there, is that when people talk about divorce, they think that it's the first problem they've ever encountered and they can't find the solution to it. Right. So I remember specifically when we were going through a hard time that I heard somebody, they weren't even talking to our situation, but I heard them say, man, I could have divorced my husband 3 different times. And they've been married for like 40 years now. Right. Wow. Wait, really? So you felt this exact feeling, but you overcame it. And then it came again a decade later of something different, you know, and you overcame that. And so to know that, like, dude, you might feel this feeling, like it's normal to be in a relationship and to feel a feeling of disappointment at some point. And enough disappointment that you're like, I kind of don't want to be near you. Now, when you're married, you're in the same household, you're in the kitchen together, you're in bed together. It's like, so you could even get more annoyed. But to understand that, if there's any hope for people that hopefully don't get divorced, is that light at the end of the tunnel is like, you might feel that feeling 4 times in your lifetime, right? But just know that there's grace and mercy for a reason, right? And there's compassion for a reason, right? And like another thing that mindset wise, what I do is I say, the same grace and mercy that we give our kids, the same compassion that we give our kids, we should give our spouses, right?
So
Psalms 103:13 is a father that has compassion for his kids is like the Lord having compassion for us because we fear him, right?
So
And so that
Ooh, you just so sexy right now. So good.
Tara.
what is
Preach. You better preach.
Oh wow! I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh,
I love it.
But I just love the mindset. I love that comparison with kids. Another thing that I did when many seasons with her is I said, even though maybe I wasn't in alignment or I wasn't in agreement selfishly, right? Like that she was on an entrepreneurial path that maybe I just didn't agree in that season, whether it was a month or a week or whatever. I'd say, if she was Waverly, if she was my daughter, would I be proud of her? And the answer was yes.
Wow.
And I was like, wow. So this is really something that I'm struggling with, right? This is not something that she's doing wrong.
Wow.
It's just something that I'm not finding alignment in my selfishness.
Wow.
So now selflessly, I'm going to support her through this.
Wow.
Because if I can shift that mindset
Yes.
to if Waverly was her at 28 years old or 30 years old, as a father, would I be so proud of Waverly? And dude, I would be exploding with joy knowing that Tamra's doing what she's doing right now, right? Just like exploding with joy, right? And so so then that's a good like discernment of just like, am I in the wrong, and can I take responsibility for being like, that I'm being selfish here, And so that's a good tool that I use as well.
Yeah, that's so good.
That's so good.
Yeah,
I was just thinking, like, literally, like, honestly, just I don't know, it was like 2-3 weeks ago. Like, we were on this marriage counseling session, and our counselor was like, Darryll, you need to stop taking stuff so personal. Like, this has nothing to do with you. And I'm like, yeah, it does, because I'm not getting the love, I'm not getting the affection, I'm not getting the respect I feel like I deserve, I'm not getting treated like who I am in this relationship, la da da da. And it's just like, I saw essentially what I didn't say it on the call, but I was definitely emoting it.
Your
Like,
body said it. Yeah.
Emoting.
Like, steaming on the marriage counseling call. And then we get off, and I'm just like sitting with it, which is something I like to do. I always like to process before I re-engage.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I was like, man, she's right. Like, this is a Brit thing. Like, she has a thing around this. It's not like she woke up and was like, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to hurt you and disrespect you today. Like, it was just like, she's just in her own growth and healing process. And I started to like see like, oh man, it's like everything I was taking personal wasn't personal at all. It was just her and her own process. And then it actually birthed compassion and understanding and grace and patience and just dropping stuff and just giving her space to work through stuff. So
well, because entrepreneurship is such a microscope of everything that you didn't realize was like still in there. Like, because if you work for a corporate or you work for a nonprofit and it's not your name, your company, your baby, like you can lean into that, right? It's their company mission, vision, values, and you're just helping support that.
Right.
As an entrepreneur, it's like, no, we are putting our DNA into this. And so if I'm showcasing that to the world and I want to like sell it and market it and have people invest in our business, like we are on display 100%. So when we began to work more closely together in this way, like even in ministry, it wasn't like that for me because it was still the church, right? Like, but with our business, it's like, hey, there's a bunch of stuff that keeps like getting uncovered as we walk through this journey. And I'm like, hey, this has been such a, like there's nowhere to hide.
Yeah, exposing. That was like exposing. Yeah, agreed.
So like you want to click live and go live and talk about your passions and what you feel like God has laid on your heart for your business. Like every insecurity pops up in that moment. And so then you are like in your own process, and then you have to face each other and do it together. If I'm not dealing with and like handling my own stuff, it comes right out at him.
Totally.
And it's like, he's not the problem. I have my own stuff that I'm working through. And then when your income is tied to all of that inner work, oh my gosh, if you're not like in therapy and in prayer, like it's not going to work.
It's so true.
Yeah.
One of the things that's coming up for me is something that Gary practiced. And I don't encourage you to go do this right now, Darryll or Brittany, because they're going to know based on this conversation. But without me knowing, I don't know if it was his idea or somebody told him to do it. But when I was not walking in the utmost like way that he knew that I could, like he saw the goodness in me, right? He knew who I was made to be. And he would call out this language. He would say, I just love your integrity. And at the time I was like, that's weird that you would say that. First off, I'm not a words of affirmation lover. So I was always just like, he could have said like, I just love whatever. And you're the best entrepreneur ever. And I would be like, I don't receive that right now. But he called out my integrity, and he used this word that one, I had to go look up the definition too, because I was like, I only sort of know what this means. And two, I was not operating in integrity. So immediately, without having any connection to the Holy Spirit, I was not walking my faith at that point. There was still that twinge in my stomach that was like, I don't know that that's true. And so whether or not you're calling names to the person, but more so calling them up, like calling your spouse up into the identity that they have. I love how brave you are. Even when they don't feel brave in that moment, or they're not acting brave, it calls them into bravery. Because they're like, man, if he sees me as integral, then why am I not acting in integrity? And how can I become that thing that he wants me to be and sees me as and appreciates me as? And so there's like a duality in communication of when someone gives you something as a gift, but also a calling up and a calling out. Man, if we were better at receiving and better at self-analyzing, it would make our relationship so much better rather than pointing fingers.
Yeah, that's so good.
Oh my God, dude. Y'all, we're coming close to needing to land the plane, and I'm super frustrated by that.
We can sit here all day. This is great.
The freaking questions that I think I can do this, talk about this for 4 hours. Like seriously, like I know I wanted to dive deeper into like the kid journey and like the difference between like not the difference, but the discernment of knowing that they have callings and knowing you can see it, and knowing that because you've walked the entrepreneur path yourself, you can help them, but also giving them space to just like figure it out and like grow into their own understanding. I think we just need to do a whole separate episode that's just about the kids.
Agreed.
Especially because like our kids are so unique and different. Like Cooper is totally different than Waverly.
Yeah.
And then our kids, like Ava's her own brand. All our kids, I said this the other day, all our kids are like their own brand. Like Ava's her own thing. Ariana's just this woman. And Maya's just like the anomaly of like all the things. And then of course Isaiah, my man's homie is just like the most potent version of both of us. It's just like it's just interesting. And so much we can say. So like I'm gonna like seed that for a future episode. And then the thing I maybe want to like dive into for a second here is like this dynamic that interests me about y'all, which is Gary, what I would call like, I don't actually perceive it this way, but like the world mostly does, and it did strike my attention that Tamra as a woman is like more public forward facing brand. And then Gary's like what he's calling hallway minister, right? Like I'd love to know like what's your thought process around that? How do you view your like dynamic as a couple as entrepreneurs? And like how have you been successful at navigating that path?
So I think a lot of that is just like when you were talking about the kids, right? Like how do you grow the kids up into their entrepreneurial path, right? And it's by their gifts, right? So like what do they do the easiest that costs them the least amount of energy? It's that simple. That's a problem. Right? It's literally
Say that again, Gary.
So like Tamra can do this all day long, and it doesn't cost her energy, right? It fills her cup. Literally, her cup is overflowing. And when she comes to me, she's overflowing, right? Which I want. I don't want Tamra with a half cup where I'm then trying to fill her up with my cup. And if I come half cup, we're both 50-50. That's not good.
Yeah.
Right? So when I'm hallway ministering, I feel alive. Like I feel present. I feel useful. You know what I mean? I feel like God's using me right, in that moment. And so it comes down to gifts, right? I don't have a desire to walk into her shoes and be the front face of a company. I really don't. But because it's not my gift, I'm not saying that it couldn't be my gift a decade from now or 2 years from now. But
baby, let's go.
That's right. Speak it. Right. But that's where I think that it's just identifying the gifts in each other, and like elevating and giving the platform and the position so that there's most purpose.
And I think for me, again, there was this like Jesus, pre-relational, emotional intelligence, mental health, wellness, this whole pre-season of who I am as a wife, as a leader, as a mom, than who I obviously am now. And the biggest transitions for me were, even though I might be positioned visibly for you all to see up front, I come under him. I am behind him. He is my shield, a protector in so many ways, like Jesus. And obviously God being in the forefront of him. But us allowing each other to grow spiritually has allowed me to be safe in my forward facingness, because I come back to somebody who sees me, who knows me and loves me on my best days, and sees me, knows me, and loves me on my worst. And so he's my number one advocate. He is my number one mentor. And I go to him before I do anything in regards to business structure or shift or change or travel. And what do you think? What do you think? And he's been my biggest investor. And so if I don't honor that, then what happens to our marriage? I, again, will come out and be like, oh, I can do this on my own, which is what I did for so long. And that was a lie. And so as a woman, my concern is always, am I protected and am I seen? And he does those things so well. And so I'm so grateful for his wisdom and him going before me, because he has, like he said, with entrepreneurship in so many ways, I'm like, this partnership is scary. This contract doesn't make sense. This lawsuit sucks. Right. And he, every single time now, and especially in the last 3-ish years, he smiles when I tell him and present him a problem. And he gives me this smirk and I'm like, I know what you're doing. He doesn't give me the answer. He never gives me the answer. He always allows me to walk through it. But because he's protecting me, I know I'll be safe. And so that is something I think we get wrong a lot. We think, I've got the answer. Here's the answer. You do this thing. But he knows me well that I need to figure it out on my own, because what he says isn't going to matter in that moment. And so it's just been a really cool dance that we've gotten to do in our journey together. And I know that it's just like so much more is about to blossom and happen. And I'm so grateful for that.
That's so good.
Freaking epic,
That's
man.
So who's like the coach? Like, who's Michael Jordan's coach that people don't always know his name?
Phil Jackson.
It's like Phil Jackson.
Good. Do you have a coach right now? Who's your mentor? Like, this guy.
He's very famous. Like, people don't really know Phil Jackson. Like,
not bad. Well, Phil Jackson's not on all the shoes. So,
so good.
I think, dude, another podcast episode. Like, it's just like, it's so funny when you've gone through so much. Sometimes you don't realize all the wisdom that you learned in overcoming the scenarios you've been through. And like, I'm listening to you articulate certain things and lawsuits and business failures and investments and like, and then I'm like, and I'm like, no. Lawsuits, investments, like, and I guess like a good umbrella question on that is like, how, like, it again, like, it sounds like there's been a level of investment, like not just emotionally but financially, from Gary into like the things you've done. And even though like a lot of times it was because I have been more forward facing and like kind of breadwinner, but it's our money, right? Like, so like there's been a lion's share of investment into the things that I feel passionate about, and not so much as her. Like if you look at the balance sheet, it's like Darryl's entrepreneurship journey and all of our money, and then it's like, oh, Britt's things that she wants to do, you know? And ultimately, like, we're in a really beautiful season where she's actually coming alongside, and it's just like, oh, she gets to stand in this. So she thought it was just me, but it's us now. Let's go.
It's so good.
But like, how, Gary, how did you handle that? Like, if Tamra comes to you, big idea, this thing is going to work, it's going to be all amazing.
That never happens.
You're like, sure, I believe in you.
Right.
And the thing doesn't work out. And how did you handle that?
Yeah.
Because I've failed 1,000 times. And I mean, essentially, again, every single time that you fail, you just fail forward. Right. I mean, you can absolutely get knocked down for sure. But like that faith of a mustard seed, you know, I mean, it's just, if God has, you know, planted this in her heart, then let's go. Like we're both big risk takers. I mean, that's another thing.
Yeah.
Is that we're willing to like put all the chips on the table and try something. Right. And I mean, that's literally like the definition of being an entrepreneur is risk taker, you know? So it's, we're willing to do that. And again, that's what she went to college for. That's where like my heart has been this whole time. So now we're just deep into this, but again, you get to see essentially us trying to build this tree and then the fruit that falls from it. Right. So we're just trying to build the strongest tree possible. There's times where branches fall off. Right. And there's time where the tree has to get staked back up, you know? So I think that just supporting her as much as I possibly can, you know, and it hasn't always, I haven't been able to support her in every single thing possible, you know. Maybe if there's this huge thing that she wants to do and we just don't have the resources to do it, you know, we have to say no, or we have to put it, you know, into the next season.
Yeah.
Let's do that in 6 months, or let's try that in a year.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens, you know, and let's just day to day, let's try and move 1 foot at a time. Let's just, you know, when I do climb these mountains, Darryll, I look, they look impossible. Like when you get out of the car and you look at the mountain, you're like, that's legit not possible to do.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, you have to climb 8,000 feet vertical and you have to go do it over 20 miles and you have to do it in 1 day. Right. And every single time, I mean, there's times that I've failed for sure, but like every single time it's just 1 foot in front of the other. I can't jump to the top of the mountain. There's no elevator. So sometimes when she comes up with an idea, I'm like, okay, cool. Well, let's put the ladder against the building and work our way towards the roof. Because you can't jump on the roof. So like tomorrow we can.
Yes, we can.
Give me a trampoline.
Well, she
got it.
Don't tell us we can't.
She believes it. She believes it. But that's where I try not to be like the pessimist.
Right.
And I try to be more like the realist.
Yeah.
And all I can do is go back on my own experience. Right.
Yeah.
Like I said, man, I remember like when I had to try and build this and I failed and like I kept trying to like climb the ladder, but then I slipped down like 7 or 8 rungs and then I got back up and I tried to do it again. But I never remember there being a working elevator. Or I never remember being able to put these shoes on where I can jump to a 40-foot roof, you know? So like, because I don't know that, I think this is the path that we take. Now, God is miraculous and he can create the way and maybe he could jump us up to the 40-foot roof. Right. But I don't know how to do it. You know,
I was going to say too, and there's seeding another episode is like how 2 money stories come together.
Oh God.
And that has been trying for me because there's elements of shame connected to this very conversation. There's elements of like, man, I get so frustrated that my business has funded other families to go do things, but it's never funded my family. But that is just a financial, that's just a paper, that's just a dollar sign. But when he talks and when we talk and we have conversations like this, it's not about the money, it's about the fruit. And if it's about sustenance and not success, like I mentioned earlier, guess what? I could feed my kids all day long and they'd be healthy. Fruit. They aren't going to always have money and inflation is going to do this and this is going to happen, or we're going to invest in something different and that's going to fail, or all of these things. And so when I feel that sense of shame, or I feel that sense of like regret, even sometimes on where my business is now versus where I imagine it would be, but I had one word from the Lord, and he has to trust that word. And the word that God has given me year in and year out of our business is don't take a penny. And so how can I carry shame to a word that God has given me when I know I've heard it multiple times? And so it's like at the end of the year, I'm like, hey, babe, remember that thing I was really hoping God wouldn't do again? Well, he said it again in a different way, in a different, this is what he said. And so he deciphers that and he sits with it, and he's not going to question God, but he does come at it with another lens, because he can have a conversation with the Lord too. And God can speak to him too. And so that's where I am able to rid my shame, because I just lay it right back on God. I'm like, God, you said. And so I follow suit with what he says. And then I'm able to come to him with confidence when I ask for something. But it's, there's also the things where, because he is the breadwinner, he's like, hey, babe, I got a new car. And I'm like, what? Like, that's a huge, what do you mean? And so he makes investments and does things that he's passionate about, because he sees the marketing and he follows trends and he does things on his own too. So, hey, we're going to buy a new house. I'm like, we're going to do what? And so this is where the entrepreneurial, like, we have to communicate. And ultimately, I think this entire thing comes down to, even intimacy, is how's intimacy cultivated through communication.
Yeah.
And that's something we invested heavily in for years in and years out. You mentioned therapy. We went to marriage counseling every single week for almost 3 years. I went individually. He went individually. And we still ended up in a pit at the end of that 3 years. But we learned vital training skills that have brought us to this conversation today.
Yeah. Well, I heard somebody say that most people take more training on how to drive a car than they do how to live in a relationship. And it's just like, man, relationship is so much more complex. Relationship is so much more complex. It's so much more dynamic. It's so much more challenging. It's so many more gears than a car. And so how much more do we invest in understanding one another, how each other works, how to navigate this? Because it's crazy. Man, what you got, homie?
There's so much. We're going to come back again and again.
We are. This is so good.
I just appreciate you guys for being such an open book, and for allowing God to speak through you and modeling. Like we've gotten the privilege to hang out with you all and to interact with your kids, and your kids are amazing, incredible humans. And that would not be the case if you guys weren't amazing, incredible humans yourself. So we're just like so honored to know you, and to your ministry feeds us just by living your lives and watching you in these conversations that we get to have with you guys. So it just feels like chapter 1, and we'll just have more and more chapters. That's really all.
I know. Chapter 1 of 30.
Don't be talking about publishing a book together, you guys. I'm gonna come after you.
Let's go. So we bought it. I think we need to do another episode called Unpacking Gary. I just think it's so good. Yeah. He's like, I ain't coming to that one.
It's it. One and done. You shouldn't have seated that show.
He's like, oh, no more. No, but seriously, I just think this gift of presence, I think everybody has that opportunity to choose that. But from my experience being on the other side, I remember being in the hallway and connecting with Gary. And the thing about, and even the practice of being in the present moment, it's super potent.
Oh, yeah.
Like if everybody were to take a deep breath and start to really get in touch with what's happening, it's like, same thing with this guy. It's like you come to him and it's like, and it's just like this expansive nature from being in that present moment. And I think it's a good thing to unpack. So we're going to unpack Gary. We're going to talk about kids. We're going to talk about money stories. We're going to do all the things. But y'all, let us know, how can people get in touch with you, and how can they connect with you if they want to?
Yeah, since I'm the easier one to get a hold of, as you know, you can DM me on Instagram, tamraandress.com. Yeah, you can get my book, Our Story. Really, I wrote it, but it's Our Story, Always Becoming. And I'm any other way, just ask Darryll and Brittany. They got my number.
Yeah.
Save the date for November 2024 FounderCon and all of the amazing things that'll happen at that conference next year.
Yeah, we're so excited. I love that it's family oriented. I love that it's couples. There's so many couples that show up, and more are coming each year. So we've had the gift of Darryll in the past and the gift of Brittany in the past, and now they're going to come together this year. And so it's just like this explosive thing that's happening, and it's all God. It's all God. We point to him. We thank him for this time and for your friendship. We love you guys so much.
Love you guys.
Love you too. Guys, go follow them, go connect with them, see if you can find Gary. Good luck. Thank you. Let us know what you're taking away from this, and remember to share with people you love. All right. Peace.
Bye, guys.